I've begun by describing this hierarchy because it helps to explain, I think, the nature of the transaction we're dealing with. This transaction had two main elements. The first centred upon the perceived expectations of the newly independent states themselves. It was regarded as natural in London that these countries would want a proper royal, and if possible, a senior one. The provision of such a royal was therefore a gesture of goodwill by the former imperial power, one that would be welcomed by the newly independent nation and would have the effect of cementing relations with Britain. In at least one case, that of Tanganyika, London's willingness to accede to a request for a deluxe royal in the interests of promoting good relations with the territory had a direct impact on the date of independence. And this goes back to a point that David Killingray raised earlier on. Tanganyika's independence had originally been set for the 28th of December 1961. But Prime Minister Julius Nyerere was worried that a date so close to Christmas would make it difficult for foreign dignitaries to get out there. And so a decision was taken to move the date forward to the 20th of December. But before that date was announced, Nyerere and his cabinet requested that the Duke of Edinburgh should represent the Queen. Now, the palace was consulted, and the palace said, fine, in principle, although there may be a problem with the Duke's schedule because he's ending a tour of West Africa on the 6th of December. So the date will have to be moved forward again. Officials at the Colonial Office, as already said, were a little bit worried about this, but MacLeod overruled them, largely because Nyerere was contemplating making his country a republic, and MacLeod thought that the presence of a high-ranking royal might avert this. He also thought it would be easier to defend in the United Nations because it would appear to have been chosen to allow Tanganyika's admission to the General Assembly before the Assembly went into recess. And hence on the 4th of July 1961, MacLeod announced that Tanganyika's independence would be brought forward to the 9th of December, although he neglected to explain that the new date had been chosen to fit in with the royal schedule. If the attendance of a member of the royal family was seen in London as a gesture of goodwill, it was also, of course, a powerful symbolic assertion that the transfer of power was a voluntary and calculated decision by a country whose power and dignity were undiminished by the act of granting independence. The corollary of this personification of national prestige was that the British government was highly sensitive about any possibility that the significance of the royal visitor wouldn't be properly acknowledged, or that they might be exposed to embarrassment, indignity, or even danger. And again, this comes back to David Killingray's point about undignified things happening. A mark of this anxiety was the fact that serious questions were raised in the cases of both Ghana and Malaya about whether a royal should actually be present on Independence Day itself. Richard Rathbones talked about Independence Day as being joyful events. I think the fear in London was that they would be too joyful. And although the Duchess of Kent was due to go out to open the territory's new legislature, officials in London were concerned that, quote, there would be a real risk if she was present on Independence Day itself, that the significance of her presence would be overlooked in the excitement of the celebrations. In the case of Malaya, the problem, again, as Tony has referred to, is the fact that the Queen would not continue to be Queen of Malaya on independence. Instead, it would be the Ogon as representative of the collective sovereignty of the rulers. And the Colonial Office was worried that ceremonies involving the new Malayan head of state might raise, quote, awkward questions regarding the precedence of the member of the British royal family representing the Queen in relation to the Ogon. And again, it was really only on the Tunku's special request that it was decided to send a member of the royal family, in this case the Duke of Gloucester. Richard referred to Suez. In the case of both Malaya and Ghana, a British royal was only sent on the understanding that Nasser would not be invited, nor would any other Egyptian representative. That was a clear condition. Rather bizarrely, in the case of the Duke of Gloucester, his previous engagement had been overseeing independence in Ceylon in 1948, had been bedeviled by fears that he might be overshadowed again, but in this case by an empty chair, or more specifically by an empty throne, the throne of the last king of Kandy, which had been returned as part of his visit. The plan was, when he opened the new Ceylon Parliament, the throne would be seated above him. And this raised fears in the mind of the governor of Ceylon that, quote, the ordinary spectator may regard the empty throne as something superior to the Duke as king's representative. Gender certainly played a part in all of this. Male royals were clearly perceived as being less likely to sustain injuries to national prestige, being generally more robust and hence less susceptible to embarrassment. Having warned London in October 1972 of, quote, the real possibility that the Barbados independence celebrations would be so ill-organised that it could prove prudent not to expose a royal visitor to the resultant shambles, the governor of the territory was relieved to learn that Prince Charles would be representing the Queen. He suggested that, quote, now that the Prince of Wales has been selected, there is no royal lady involved, there will be a slightly greater licence for confusion, unquote. This gender issue played a significant role in the arrangements for the independence of Mauritius in 1968, a rare case in which a royal visit was actually cancelled because of security concerns. In March 1968, the governor, Lord Shepherd, advised that in the light of the state of emergency currently in place, the visit should be cancelled. He told London that while the likelihood of any direct personal attack was remote, quote, a degree of risk of embarrassment, marginal though it might be in the eyes of the security experts, does exist. But it was clearly assumed that a man would be less susceptible to this embarrassment than a woman. And both the cabinet of Mauritius and officials in London were keen to explore the possibilities of sending a royal member of a male member of the royal family in her place. In the end, however, the security situation was judged to be such that no royal should be sent at all. One final point to conclude with. Although royal husbands and wives were seen as an asset, royal girlfriends were not. The Duchess of Kent proved a great success at Uganda's independence ceremony in 1962. When, however, the previous year, the Duke had suggested taking his then fiancée with him to Sierra Leone celebrations, the country's Prime Minister had expressed doubts to the governor about whether, quote, Creole church people of Freetown would think it proper. It might not be acceptable in London either. Indeed not. Thank you very much.